All right, hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy Ask Us Anything live stream. I'm Stephen Barr, your co-host Rahul Subramaniam, and welcome to episode number 20. Can you believe it?
Can you believe it? Two tens.
Yeah, it's 20
We were
hours.
wondering when we would wondering if you'd even do one set of 10. But yeah, it's been awesome. It's actually been really cool to do this every week. And yeah, we do miss an occasional week because of logistical conflicts. But yeah, we try to make this every week. And it's been so much fun.
I think we've gotten over that hump, and especially with the process automation, just reducing the burden of actually producing each one. You know, the first couple, everything was all manual, but it's getting more and more automatic, so we can focus on hopefully delivering valuable content.
Absolutely. And I'm not entirely sure. I think this is one of those chicken and egg problems. You build that automation once you've got enough of momentum going with you, and you also get a little bit of the momentum because you have all this automation in place. It becomes so much easier to actually do one of these live shows. So I think it kind of works both ways.
Well, as programmers, right, any excuse to kind of dive into an API, it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and this episode is not going to be any different. We've got tons of very interesting stuff to cover. But before that, how was your weekend, Stephen?
Oh, wow. It was a bit smoky. Here, I'll share the screen with you. Seattle is going through, there's a fire a few hours east, but depending on the wind, we get this big this smoke pattern. It's been a bit hard, the little kids especially. It's been affecting my two little ones, their lungs. So later today, we're going to build one of these. It's called a Corsi Rosenthal cube, and it's basically taking 4 air conditioning filters because they're cheap and easy to get, and then gluing a box fan or taping a box fan to the top of it, so that the box fan will bring in air and then push it out through the filters. So that'll be a fun project to do later.
That is pretty neat. So it's got a fan inside or a suction
It's a fan here up at top. This is the fan, and that's
got it.
Pulling the air from the top, from above, into the fan and pushing it out through the filters. And so I think as part of this, I guess with the older ones, it reminded me of the scene of this scene.
I want you to rip the cover off the flight plan.
Apollo 13.
With pleasure.
All right, now the other materials you're going to need here are...
this is the famous scene. There we go.
Lithium hydroxide.
Famous scene where they had to make the carbon dioxide scrubbers. And they needed to build this adapter based on what they had. So this is hopefully channeling a little bit of this makeshift mentality to get the fan working. How about you? How was your weekend?
As you know, last week was a little insane. I was at the governing board meeting of the FinOps Foundation. So I literally made a 1.5-day trip to Boston for that. The meetings over there were incredibly valuable. I mean, I'm really glad I made the trip. It was totally worth it. But most of the weekend was trying to figure out if my body was in jet lag or not. Doing a 1.5-day trip, you're not fully jet lagged, but you're not jet lagged either. So it was this very funky state where, I would need power naps like 5 times a day to kind of work through the day.
That is an incredible amount of travel. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're back home safe and hopefully feet on the ground for a little while.
Yep. Going to be here. But reInvent is coming up not long from now. So that's going to be another fun trip.
That's actually, that's a fun segue. I'm going to transition. And again, remember, we use these transitions to divide our code into our show into segments. So with that, let's transition into our introduction and announcement section. Here goes. What I realize is we need different types of transitions. They all have to have that same property where we can pick them up with recognition, but we need a few different types that we can set depending on the segment.
Right.
So that'll be for next week. Let me share the screen with you. Oops, not that one. That one. Speaking of reInvent, and I'll put this this banner here. reInvent session. The reInvent. If you're going, then it's time to. In 1 hour, the seat reservation opens, and you can register. We encourage you to register for this talk. Rahul will be giving a talk about AWS recommended savings opportunities. What's that going to be about? What's the quick preview?
So the quick preview of that is that it's incredibly hard to get savings on AWS, especially ones that are material. And we're just sharing a lot of our experiences of managing over 45,000 accounts. And we've kind of developed I'd say a run book or a rule of thumb of how you should go about saving money. It is possible to save up to 50%, but it doesn't follow the conventional wisdom that you hear all over the all over the internet about how you should go about doing it. So I'm going to share our experience of going through this. We manage 45,000 plus accounts, and we have what we call our 10-30-50 rule. So there are 3 stages to getting this kind of savings, and it's a very systematic way to get it. The big bang, let's go do one, big initiative just doesn't work. So I'm going to talk about that, and hopefully, the listeners are going to benefit from trying to take that and apply that to their own setups. So I'm simplifying what it takes to save money on AWS.
Well, awesome. We're looking forward to it. And then if you can't make it to reInvent in person, it's a huge event. If you can't make it, we'll be posting about it online in the days leading up to it. And actually that leads to another announcement. Just wanted to give a quick plug to our YouTube channel. We've got, I wanted to show that here. I'll post that in the chat. All of our episodes, all the highlights that we do, it all leads into we have a great YouTube channel. We talk about the highlights of past episodes. You can look at the highlights of these different episodes by, there's our interview with Jeff Barr. That was 7 episodes ago.
Wow, it's been that long?
Yeah. And there's also highlights from the Anaheim Summit, where you can learn a little bit more about CloudFix. I think it'll be a somewhat similar content. So please check out our YouTube channel. I posted the link in the comments. And then also we have a very similar Twitch channel with the same contents. So whatever your platform of choice, go like, subscribe, and set that alarm bell. You can get the notifications of when we post new highlights. Another fun announcement. I did a blog post recently based on a topic that we mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, but the blog post just got published about using dev spaces to deploy AWS Lambda functions with function URLs. I put the link in the description. This is a really, really, really useful feature of Lambda, and then with dev spaces, we've packaged it up in a really easy to use GitHub template, so you can just clone the repository, fill in your environment variables, and then right there you've got SAM CLI set up. You've got a sample function you can get started. So if you just need a function that's publicly accessible, like if you want to catch a webhook somewhere, or have just a scheduled Lambda function that does some data cleanup for you, or you can use it as an alarm clock, whatever you're doing, it's really easy to have a Lambda function with a function URL using dev spaces. So check out this blog post. It's got lots of, there you go, how to use the template. It's pretty thorough. So I encourage you to have a look at this.
Absolutely. By the way, like I've said before, function URLs are my latest favorite thing out of AWS, and I've been using them pretty much everywhere. So go check it out. I think Stephen has made it really easy to get started with it, with dev spaces, SAM, and get it all deployed in a matter of minutes. So yeah, I'd urge everyone to go check it out.
And we'll put the, let's see, here's a link. You do trygraviton.devspaces.com. The link is also obviously in the blog post itself. So have a look. And one other thing, we are doing a dev spaces. If you're in Seattle, send me a message. I've got some friends and I are getting together tonight for a inaugural Dev Spaces and Thai Takeout hackathon. This is a friend of mine. I introduced him to Dev Spaces, and he's really gotten into it. And so I told him to take a picture. And he's got the Space Needle, his beverage of choice, and he's actually running the OpenAI Whisper on a Dev Space. This is his iPad Mini. But he likes to run everything through the terminal. But this is Dev Spaces, the SAM Lambda Pi function, running on a Graviton, doing speech recognition.
Oh, that's so awesome! I'm going to miss the Thai food. I wish I was in the other part of the world with you guys doing this.
We'll post some pictures of the event, and hopefully we can. If it goes well, I think we can try and make it a low key monthly thing that we can do. We'll find some space and publicize the location. It could be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. All right. Well, awesome. Let's see. Anything else on the announcements place? We talked about the.
Oh yeah, there's one other part, which is I'm going to be hosting. We are trying to make a big splash at reInvent. So we're all going to be at reInvent. And I am hosting a private watch party for all the keynotes. We have an amazing suite set up. So if you're interested in coming and joining us, talking to us, and watching all the keynotes, whether it's Adam Slipsky's or Peter DeSantis's or even Werner Vogel's, just reach out to us, and we would love to have you there. And you can reach out to us. Yep, the handles. We'd love to have you on board. Come and join us and talk to us. So, looking forward to it.
Well, great. I'll post this banner a few times throughout the stream. I think that would be a lot of fun. I'll be there. So, Ro will be there. We'll have a great time. All right. Well, let's jump into our first segment. We're going to be talking about AWS Connect. Here we go. All right. Let's post this article in the dashboard. I'll share my screen. There we go. AWS Connect now provides a queue dashboard. I think this is a really straightforward article. AWS Connect now provides a dashboard that enables you to view and compare real-time queue performance through time series graphs. You get key metrics like service level, contacts queued, average handle time to track and improve queue performance. Let's see, you can get metrics. How is your queue doing on this week versus prior weeks, and try to understand what's going on. What do you think about this announcement?
I think I'm going to start with saying that AWS or Amazon Connect is literally one of those services. If you just looked at their announcement volumes week over week, you can make out that this is one of those services that has so much attention, a fairly large team that's constantly looking to push this product and this service to the next level, that I get extremely excited about this particular service. And this is just one more in the ever-growing list of announcements that we see every week. And this is really simple. I mean, this is knowing where you stand in terms of your queues of calls coming in, of customer requests that need to be processed, and so on, is one of the most fundamental operations of a well-oiled machinery in support. And so the fact that you can now have a out-of-the-box dashboard that gives you all of that is, I mean, it just adds to the value of this particular service. It just makes Connect a no-brainer for deploying and running your entire call center operations.
There's a classic book. I remember in half a lifetime ago, I studied queuing theory, and this is the book, the Shortle. And I thought, Rahul, you might be familiar with this phenomena.
Yes.
This is that's the key metrics you want out of a queue: waiting time, service time, how long is the line, and what's your things on average. And you could derive all this stuff with, we did a lot of these proofs and asymptotic limit theorems, all this stuff. but being able to actually see it from your data using a simple dashboard that Connect provides, that's pretty good. I'm very happy with that feature.
I mean, the bottom line for me, whenever I look at any of these process-oriented operations, is I ask for what I call the stocks and flows. For every station that's processing something, what is the inventory that's sitting in backlog? What is the rate at which things are getting done? And if you have that for an entire kind of assembly line, then you basically can make all the right decisions. And it's one of those simplest things that can enable so much productivity and efficiency in those assembly lines that, and the fact that now that's coming as part of the standard dashboard is pretty awesome.
Even things that seem simple now, like when you call into a call center and they say the wait time is estimated to be 15 minutes, or we will call you back within half an hour. How do you actually make that guarantee? It could be that all the people who are on the phone are going to keep you on the phone for the next hour, keep all your agents tied up. So how do you make that guarantee with what level of reliability? And this kind of data is what allows you to make those kind of data-driven decisions.
Completely agree.
So what do we give this article in its context?
I think the content-wise, it's fairly simple. I'd probably give it a 4 on the content, and it simplifies things, right? I mean, building a dashboard, trying to collect the data, dump it into S3, then build a quick set dashboard. I mean, the fact that I can click a button and get it makes it really simple.
So for those of you who are new to the show, for every article or announcement, we give it a number of clouds out of 5, and also does it add simplicity or complexity. And so in this case, this is simplifies. It's a dashboard, tells you what's going on with your queue, seems straightforward, gives you the metrics you need to know. Would have been nice if they'd put a screenshot. That would have been nice.
That would have been really cool. If had there been a screenshot of the dashboard. I assume that it's just a QuickTime dashboard. Sorry, quick site dashboard, not QuickTime dashboard. But it should be. But this I guess it's simple enough. The concept is something that everybody understands and knows. So I'm fine with giving a 4 on this one.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let's take a 30-second break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Kendra, Corretto, and SAM permissions. So we will be right back.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, we've got Kendra releases Dropbox connector. So what is this Kendra releases Dropbox connector? We talked about Kendra last episode in how we use it to search the transcripts of this very podcast. And now Dropbox connector. But this is super cool. I think it's pretty straightforward. If you are using Kendra and you want to index a bunch of documents, you can now point it at a Dropbox drive and it will index the documents right there. So Rahul, what do you think the impacts of this are going to be? How much is Dropbox used?
I think for a large number of SMBs, Dropbox is still the place to go and share documents within the group. I think if I were to compare Google Drive and Dropbox, I'd put Google Drive a little further up the market share list. But Dropbox isn't far behind. I mean, folks have been using Dropbox for years and make it a very standard way of sharing stuff. I think if I were to look at the stream of acquisitions that I've looked at over the last, say, 3 to 5 years, I would say 30 to 40% of those acquisitions end up, sharing due diligence documents and stuff like that over Dropbox, which is interesting. It gives them a certain level of control and access control and permissions and things like that. So it is fairly widely used, I think, across the board. And the fact that now we have a connector to simply connect into that and bring in all of that data is awesome. I'd be interested in understanding what kind of permission schemes and mechanisms they use to separate out the data or to provide some level of access control. Like, do you end up searching everything once all the data is moved into Kendra, or can you access control what people are allowed to see or not see or even search?
That's a good question. You'd imagine that there might hopefully is some inclusion or exclusion criterion that you can set, similar to a lot of the S3 data type connectors.
Exactly.
And actually, speaking of connectors, I think we mentioned this earlier. There's also, so on Kendra, you can look at the set of connectors, and there's Kendra native connectors, and then there's also partner developed connectors.
Correct.
Doing a quick mention, Jive has a connector. Actually, has two connectors. Scroll down here.
Correct.
Here we go.
And I think the whole number of connectors that now exist for Kendra is pretty awesome. It's a very comprehensive list of, data storage platforms that you'll find over here.
Yeah, it was HP Consolidated Archive.
Yeah. Like, we find Jive being fairly prevalent in a lot of large-scale enterprises where you have tens of thousands of employees who need to collaborate on content. So there have been Jive connectors for Kendra and so on. So it's pretty neat that all of these have really good support within the Kendra ecosystem. So, yeah, it just makes it a no-brainer to kind of start using Kendra. I still don't see a lot of organizations using it or leveraging it for all of their enterprise-wide content. And I just don't understand why not.
I have a small hunch. I think that the Kendra pricing, it's the first step is a big step. I wish there was a developer tier that you could play with it without. I think the first step is what, $1,000 a month?
I think because it boils down to the number of documents that are going to be set up. So I think the developer edition, again, max queries per day is just 4,000 and $810 a month. And only 10,000 documents. Now, if you look at an organization, the number of documents that you want to be able to search through actually runs into hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Like, if you looked at every call, every meeting, every email sent, every chat stream that exists, you look at all of that data, and if you want it to be searchable enterprise-wide, you're talking about millions of documents. And this kind of pricing seems, very skewed, possibly, and may not work for a lot of people who are trying to do this for their enterprise knowledge base. So I wish AWS would come up with something simpler and easier to get started with, and something that actually, with scale, just becomes really, really cheap.
Yeah, I agree completely. And similarly at the low end, right? I realized, okay, if I was playing with Kendra, made a few, and then left them on, that would hurt at the end of the month.
Would definitely hurt.
I would not want to do that. So making it easier for developers, solo developers, to experiment with it, so then they can, in their day jobs, suggest this. That I would hope that at some point Kendra had a serverless option where it was just pay per search.
I agree.
All right. Well, on the contents of the article, there we go. Kendra. On the contents itself, without the bigger picture of Kendra that we just discussed, how do we rate this one?
I think this feels very boilerplate to me. Like, there's nothing specific about the Dropbox ecosystem or the way you connect or the way you would set any kind of permission streams or what you could do. I mean, this feels like a very generic, we have a new adapter, replace the word old tool with the new tool now, which is Dropbox, and you basically got the same boilerplate announcement. So I would probably give this like a 3. I don't feel like this goes in deep at all. I don't know if it needs to. That's another conversation, but I think it would have been nice to see, to showcase how easy it is to connect. Any caveats, things that it doesn't do specific to Dropbox, or how easy or difficult the mappings might be between documents and the Kendra schema. That would have been good to mention over here.
Yeah. And like you said, at least address some of those security issues, which here's where you learn more. I agree. I still think it does get us the simplifies. It's a new feature. There's no downside to it.
Absolutely. It definitely doesn't complicate matters. If you had needed to build this all by yourself, then I would have said that this really complicates matters. But the fact that that AWS has created a pattern around Dropbox simplifies this significantly.
Cool. Yeah, I agree completely.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next one, which is Corretto 19. All right. Let's pull up the article. And I was watching the as that was playing, I was thinking about our segment detection, and I realized that the banner played during that black frame that we're supposed to be able to detect. So I wonder if segment detection is going to work while that banner was playing. Now, I know that in segment detection, you can set a percentage threshold. So if 90% of the screen is black, that will count. But I might have to adjust the parameters for this one. I don't remember what I set it at. So I'm just rambling now. Corretto 19, generally available.
Great. Yeah. So for anyone else in the Java world, you probably know this or have been affected by it. A few years ago, as Oracle bought out Sun Microsystems, Java kind of went into this limbo. Oracle decided to have weird licensing around Java, and that just made it really hard for people who are writing applications in Java. And Amazon, or AWS, came up with Amazon Corretto, which is their fork of the OpenJDK stack. And they have really awesome support for Linux and Windows. I haven't tried the Mac OS so much, but it's been working great for anything that is AWS native. And so they just have now support for OpenJDK 19, which is pretty neat. One of the things that we found very interesting is that a lot of the OpenJDKs are now natively optimized to run on Graviton. So if you have Java workloads that need a lot of compute, switching over to Graviton, if you're already on OpenJDK 19 or Corretto 19, then that makes it really, really simple to switch over and start leveraging all the natively built-in optimizations within the Graviton infrastructure.
Well, I wonder how that works with the vector API here, structured concurrency vector API. Yeah, I would be really interested. I'll have a try with that. I'll put it into a dev space and see what it's like to do Corretto 19 in a Graviton. And so we can publish that on the AWS Made Easy repo. That would be a fun experiment.
I do believe we already did an experiment with Corretto. I think we did Corretto 17 and 18, and we benchmarked Corretto 17 and 18 against some of the older versions. So we do have
the
Java
Graviton 3 adoption article.
Yeah, that is the Graviton 3 adoption article where we talked about products like Jive.
I just posted that into the chat. And actually, in 2 weeks, we've got a all about Graviton discussion coming up, and we'll have a guest with that.
Really looking forward to that one as well.
And so there's some good features with Corretto. I looked at our internal chat because I'm not a Java person, but I'll keep this commenter anonymous. But I thought this was actually a pretty good analysis, and I'll put this up onto the board here. Let's see. Java 19, mostly a random set of small enhancements, but virtual threads will make a big impact. So the idea is we have lightweight threading where you can start a Java thread that isn't a one-to-one mapping with an OS thread, so it's a bit lighter. Or I guess in general parlance, this would be considered a green thread.
Yeah.
Much like Go, you can start lots of lightweight threads. Many languages now have support for green threads or virtual threads, or threads that aren't OS threads and don't get all of the mechanisms and weight that a full-on thread at the OS or kernel level would get. But you still get to have, you can make requests that then wait a long time, and you can have some thread that will poll against that request.
Correct. I think for the last few Java releases, they seem small and incremental, like the comment says. I completely agree. I don't think there are these big bang changes that are happening, but I do believe that a lot of middleware is going to start leveraging these features to get more efficient under the hood. And so getting on the latest versions of OpenJDK is going to make complete sense, because that's what is going to allow you to leverage all the performance improvements and the cost savings that you'll get out of new infrastructure like Graviton. And it really is super simple to move to a newer version of OpenJDK, because there aren't any non-backwards compatible breaking changes or new language constructs that you actually see in the language anymore. So I think these are fairly safe and straightforward upgrades to your stack, but they just they unlock so much more performance and efficiency for the underlying middleware that it feels like a no-brainer.
All right. So to summarize, what do we think of the article in terms of number of clouds?
I would give this 3 to 4.
Okay.
Because if I look at this particular, I'd probably give it a 3. And my reason is this. This seems to talk to customers who are primarily just looking to do vector API, things like that, which isn't really, like, no one's going to look at this and say, oh, I use vector API in my Java application, and so I should switch over to Corretto 19. That's not the use case you're talking about. I wish they had more around the specific optimizations that they've actually done for the AWS infrastructure. They try to keep this very neutral and non-AWS specific in the way they've actually announced this stuff. The only people who use Corretto are the people who are on AWS. And so they might as well have created a great blog post that says, here are the 17 different things that we do within, Corretto 19 that makes it really, really awesome on Amazon, the Linux 2 AMI or the Windows AMI or the Mac OS instances that you might launch. And
that's a really neat
Graviton
point.
as well.
Right. So, what are the AWS specific benefits? I'm already, like you said, you're already on Corretto. It's not like Corretto's running in Azure somewhere.
Correct. Exactly. And there's nothing that's AWS specific. So that's why I'm going to give it a 3. And I'm neutral on this one, on simplifies or complexifies. Like, I wish they had more details about why someone should switch over to OpenJDK. This feels very lackluster in terms of a call to action.
All right, we need a neutral graphic.
We need a neutral graphic, I think.
All right. Well, with that, let's take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about SAM connectors. All right. See you in about 30 seconds.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right. This one I think is really neat. I don't think this will be neutral at all. In fact, I almost want to give it a simplifies right now. This is cool. This is SAM serverless connectors. So the idea is they've added a new SAM entity. So SAM is kind of a higher level language built on top of CloudFormation that allows you to do things in a serverless way. That's the S in SAM, serverless. So with serverless connector, the idea is you have a Lambda function that needs to talk to an S3 bucket, or an SNS queue that needs to talk to a Lambda function. Well, you would do your typical, you could write all the individual elements with your SAM template, which is, again, just a CloudFormation template. But then you need to get them to talk to each other. And that means IAM policies. And that's where, at least I feel like I don't enjoy that part. And it feels like, oh, great. I was using this tool that was really simple, but now I'm back in YAML policies and looking up these kind of obtuse terms to get this all to work. But with SAM serverless connectors, all you need to do is say, I want this to talk to that, and it will generate the policy for you. The documentation is here. The what are SAM connectors? You basically say, I have a source, a destination, and do you want it to be read or write or both? And I think that the most useful bit here is all the combinations. They list this. Here, I'll put this article in. I'll put this article in the comments. I think this is really useful. It just says, okay, you want Dynamo to talk to a function with read access. You can say Lambda function wants to talk to an SNS topic. Obviously, that would be write access. Anything you'd want to do. Well, not anything, but many combinations are supported here by default. And then you don't have to go out and then generate or write these policies and get them to work. So, I don't know, Rahul, what do you think about this?
I think I really like it. You've heard me talk a lot about the future of developing applications being something that I call stitching together a bunch of AWS services to achieve outcomes. This is for the first time that I'm actually seeing some of that stitching taking some real world form from AWS's end. So this is still a lot lower than I would like it eventually. But yeah, in effect, it's stitching together these services. You just say, I want Lambda to talk to DynamoDB or Lambda to talk to SQS or SNS, whatever. And just by saying that, you're stitching these services together, and all the other policy stuff, permission stuff gets taken care of under the hood for you.
Yeah, it does. I agree with you completely. I like that higher level view of looking at it, where you really are saying, I just want this to talk to that, and give me the opinionated, approved path for how to do that without having to end up on some Medium article or Stack Overflow comment.
Correct.
I worked up a little demo of this. I think it's really neat and really straightforward. So with that, I think I'll jump into that. Well, Here we go. Let's use DevSpaces and we'll show how this demo works. So the first step in this project, I'm going to start with this SAM Lambda Pi Graviton, this template that we mentioned earlier that we had the blog post about. And I'm going to just click on use this template. And I will call this, I'll put it in AWS Made Easy. I'll call this, let's see, AME demo SAM connector 2. And I'll make it public. And let's create that repository from this template.
That is ready.
All right. So now the great thing about DevSpaces, we've got this template populated. It has our initial Lambda function, a Python Lambda function. So let's go and start a DevSpace here. Now with DevSpaces, you can pre-configure your environment variables. So I've got my AWS credentials baked into this. So any repository from AWS Made Easy, I've got a certain set of AWS credentials, your AWS access key and your AWS secret key. They are built into this. So we should be able to, so this will start in another second or two, and we're going to show you how to deploy this, this template. Let's see, I might go to one that's already started. Let's see. Let me refresh on this one. Here we go. Let me open one that I've already done. Here we go. So the key thing about this one is that we've got, okay,
There, I can see that you have a function.
I've got a function and an S3 bucket, and
Yeah.
I made a really simple function. So what it does is it will get the input, and then it will say, I can pass it a key called fname and contents. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, fname and contents. And I simply write the contents of contents into a key called fname. And then I list the new contents of the bucket back, and then I return this.
Right.
So what you can see, let's see if my other dev space started. Oh, I see. I must have broken the cache if I change something. So here's my dev space here. And what you can see is that normally what you'd have to do is, in order to get this Lambda function to talk to this bucket, you would have to create a policy and then attach it to the Lambda function. But in this case, all we did is we did my connector, which says I want the entity called Pi function. Let me zoom in on this a bit more.
So the source is the Pi function. The destination is the S3 bucket.
Yeah. And I want it to be able to read and to write. And then all I had to do was I can do deploy to AWS. I haven't made any changes, so it should figure that out. This change set should be fairly minimal. This will deploy, and then let me show you how this works. This also uses a Lambda function URL. Oh, I think what I did is I removed this. I must have removed the stack. Okay, so here's a new. It is now
Creating the
deploying.
whole stack again. Yeah.
There we go. So now it gave me an endpoint, which is right there. I can call this. So let me share with you a different screen so you can see me calling this endpoint. 1 second here. Share. Okay. So we'll take the function URL, copy that, and then if I do HTTP GET to this URL, it should list the contents of the bucket, and it's saying there's two things in there, ABC123 and AYB.text. I can change that to host. Hold on, sorry. Let me go copy and paste the bucket name again. Copy. HTTP post. And then this is a tool called HTTPy, which I really like. We'll call it a file name called xyz.text. And the contents are xyz123def456. Now that's going to write that into the S3 bucket, and then it's giving me the new listing of the bucket. And so I guess the cool thing about this is that I didn't have to deal with an IAM policy. I didn't have to do any of that. I just had to say, I want my Lambda function to be able to read and write from this bucket, and that's it.
Yeah. And SAM is really an abstraction on CloudFormation. So you get all the benefits of, the entire stack being set up. You can go inspect what happened with the entire stack creation. You have control at pretty much every level, though you don't have to deal with all of those specific details. You could if you wanted to, but you don't really have to, because all of that has been baked into a very neat template and pattern that is now available to everyone. And again, AWS gets a lot of messages from me talking about how pissed I am that they are not opinionated enough. But I think SAM and these templates are one area where they've actually done a pretty good job. There are tons of patterns, there are tons of templates that they are kind of looking at them across the board and creating these classes and creating these standard, abstractions, which save customers tons of time and tons of effort. Like had you needed to do this all by yourself within CloudFormation scripts, just that YAML would have driven you insane by now.
I knew a guy whose entire business was he had this great set of CloudFormation scripts, and he would just customize them for different clients, and that was literally his entire business. And so, as far as I know, he's still carrying on, and it's tricky to get them all working right.
Correct.
So I posted this this repository. It's in AWS Made Easy called Demo SAM Connectors. These are not real keys. Don't worry. But I've made that mistake before. But then the cool thing is you can see template.yaml, and you can see, okay, I've got a function, I've got a bucket, and there's the connector. And you can go plug in your own keys as environment variables and then just run the script called, let's see, deploy to AWS, and away you go. So please give that a try. Just use the Graviton dev spaces, and it's really easy to get started. All right. So I guess I think just to finish up this segment, what do you think in terms of cloud ratings?
I think this is a 4. Simplifying these. So my worst nightmare personally is dealing with IAM policies and schemes and stuff like that, making sure that they are set up just right. It's one of the biggest pain points in getting started with any application. And so I think this goes a really long way in simplifying that. So simplifies is definitely afforded, and I'd give it a 4 out of 5 for giving all those specific details, having that entire table of source and targets. Definitely a 4.
All right. Yeah, I agree. It was really, really easy to get started, to play with this. The fact that I probably won't have to write an IAM policy for a while unless I'm doing something, a bit for most common use cases, you won't have to do it. If you're going to use recognition, you'll probably still have to do that. But for the straightforward use cases, having a function talk to a bucket, SQS talk to Lambda, you don't have to deal with those policies anymore. That's great.
Completely agree.
All right. Well, let's continue with that theme and go on to, we are going to be talking about the S3 object lambdas. So let's run our transition and we'll come back to S3 object lambdas. Okay, we are back. Let's put the article on the screen here. There we go. S3 Object Lambda now supports using your own code to modify the results of S3 head and list API requests. I'll put the article here in the comments. The idea is, well, as it says, you can have a Lambda function that basically intercepts that call to S3 head or S3 list and do some processing on the results of that return before you actually get it. So you could do things like display files that aren't actually there, right? You can add extra entries into S3 list, or maybe depending on the context, hide some files that are there. Or you could have PDF, say if you had text files, but you had some way of rendering them to PDF on demand and you didn't want to pre-render a PDF for every text file in your bucket. You could have a Lambda function which does that for you on demand. So when you get S3 get my object.pdf, it will run it right then and there. I think this is a really neat idea. What do you think of this one?
So this almost feels like the scripting that you do in Nginx configuration or Apache configuration, where invariably when you have these kind of proxies, you want them to intercept stuff and either conform or operate with some rules about where to fetch the data, how to fetch the data, how to transform things. This makes it really easy in the serverless world, when sometimes you just need that little operation, setting up an Nginx web server that then allows you to do all these manipulations or basic head and list API stuff. Feels like an overkill, and the fact that now you can do it with a simple Lambda just opens up the doors to so many different use cases. I think there are a lot of multi-tenant systems which are not truly multi-tenant in the sense that your data stores and all are pretty much the same. And that makes sense. I mean, you don't want that additional complexity. But for setups like that, if you really wanted to create a pseudo multi-tenant abstraction on top of it, you could actually leverage something like this to do that for the customers. The header information has information about who is making the call. You look at the data. You can decide whether you want to list the files but not have them, be able to access it, or vice versa. I mean, you can decide what you want to do with it, but the fact that you have that ability with a simple Lambda function just makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really neat idea, and your head can kind of spin with different ideas that you could implement to, like you said, intercept this request on its way to the client and present things. I wanted to do a shout out to Danilo Paccia. I think that's how you say it. He is the AWS evangelist in the EMEA region, and he made a really neat Twitter thread about different ideas that you could do. So here we go. Multi-tenanted S3 bucket. You can now mask specific objects from appearing in the list response depending on the caller.
Right.
You can filter the content returned by a GET based on the caller. Data format migration. You can serve on-prem data if but it'll look like it's an S3 for the purpose of not having some conditional case baked into the code. You can have that conditional somewhere else.
Correct.
So yeah, lots of neat ideas in this thread. I posted this into the comments thread. Yeah, I think this is a really neat feature.
Agreed.
All right. Well,
so do we give this? I think I'd give this a good 4. Yeah, I think they're very explicit about what you can do with it and what it does. So I'd give it a good 4. And this is simplification. I mean, there are some scenarios. To be very honest, I haven't come across a scenario where I've really felt the need to make this kind of a change. It's in scenarios where you need that level of control. But yeah, I can now think of places where I could potentially use this functionality to do things a little more efficiently. So simplifies is the right banner for this one.
Yeah, I think so. It's neat that the very simple transformation logic can live in one place. Now, I think that there's certain caveats that you can look at in the Twitter thread about, if you were doing an S3 operation on a 10 gigabyte video, your Lambdas, you still have to deal with S3's timeouts and not Lambdas. So you don't get 15 minutes. You get 60 seconds, I think.
Right. I mean, I think it might be the API gateway equivalent constraint. So you're still talking about 30 seconds to return back a response for, whatever you're sending, unless you can figure out a way to do this asynchronously. But that's basically what it is. And I think there are limitations also to what the object size are in what gets returned back by Lambda. Was it 6 megs or something like that? Which is the size of the object you can return back. Yeah, I think there it says the request and response payload size is 6 MB.
It says S3 object Lambda uses new S3 API to return the object. Oh, but then I think he corrected himself. Okay, that's the timeout. 6 megabyte limit doesn't apply to S3 OL, but
okay.
But you still have
it's 60 seconds to stream the complete response.
Yeah. So you're not going to be transcoding a 4K video.
Not anytime soon. I think AWS batch is going to be your best bet to do something like that.
Yeah. Agreed. All right. Well, good to know that it's
great.
Good to know it's out there. How do we rate this one? We did that. We did 4.
We did that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think let's go on to our next one then, which is IAM Access Analyzer. We're doing a lot of IAM today. Yeah. Hopefully IAM in a way that's, I think I was excited for this because of the simplicity. So here goes.
Great.
There we go.
Yeah. So as you pull that up, I mean, IAM like I said, is one of those incredibly painful services that these days, like I dread if I have to do anything natively with IAM, because it just gets so complex so quickly that any announcement around IAM is something that I just love to jump into right away and understand what it is, because as long as it makes our life simpler, I think it's incredibly valuable. IAM is the bedrock or the foundation of literally every single AWS service. Who or what a service can talk to, who can access it, how you operate with it, what are the permission schemes, what can it do itself, are all determined by IAM. So if you don't get the IAM stuff right, most likely you're going to spend countless hours debugging and trying to figure out what went wrong and what is the right set of policies to have so that two services or two sets of or two pieces of infrastructure can actually talk to each other.
And I suppose what makes it a bit more complicated, just thinking about this, is if there's n AWS services, then IAM has to deal with n squared issues because they all have to talk to each other or not in some way. So that's what makes it so involved. And n squared times cross account boundaries and all the different dimensions of every single service.
And you could actually end up creating multiple different policies, and you can attach multiple different policies to a set of services. So it's actually far more than n square. I think it ends up becoming n square multiplied by m, where m might be the different instances of policies that you might want to apply to that tuple of services.
I think we've all had the issue of like try to make an object public and saying, "Oh, there's a policy blocking it." And like, which one? Which one?
Exactly. And then invariably you end up just opening up everything, because like once you run into that many issues, you are like, no, I'm now going to create another policy that overrides all the other policies that were written before it. And there's a hierarchy of those. So it makes life incredibly complicated. And anything that we can do to simplify it is totally worth it.
Well, so that gets us to the content of this particular post, Access Analyzer. And so what it's saying is it can now review your CloudTrail history and identify actions used across 140 AWS services and makes fine-grained policies. So I think what this is getting at is very importantly is what you call the principle of least privilege, right? So you want policies that give as little access as possible to do the job done and no more. And I've seen places where people have given out the root credentials to every consultant that walks through the door and made a mess. I won't name who this is, but it was a mess. And this is what you don't want to do. You want every IAM access key to do as little as it can possibly do, and that way you prevent, as these keys get passed around and sent in Slack DMs and wherever else they end up, they can't do any more than they're meant to.
Yeah.
And one thing go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing that I haven't understood from this particular announcement, and I love tools like this that actually do all of this analysis for you and can generate very fine-grained policies. The part that I now struggle with, and again, back to the complexity of IAM, one of the ways that you stay organized within the IAM world is to have hierarchies of roles and permissions, because everything kind of is RBAC. So it's role-based access control for pretty much everything else. So you create the scheme of what the role is and what access you're granting, and then you have hierarchies around them. So someone like admin the admin policy is basically an aggregation of a bunch of different other policies, whether it be a power user policy plus IAM permissions added to it and so on. So that kind of hierarchy in management makes a little bit of sense, because then you know exactly who the groups are. Mapping the roles to a specific set of policies makes it really easy. Over here, if you're now going to generate fine-grained control in one single policy, then you kind of lose out on that hierarchy, right? It's now your new policy is not an aggregation of the underlying policies. So if you make a change in one of your other policies, it should have reflected in the higher order policies, but probably doesn't anymore. And that becomes a whole other management issue that you have to go deal with. So let's say
That's actually a really good point. So I see what you're saying. So if you say, okay, I want all policies of this particular type to now be able to write to this SNS topic because I'm adding a new feature to my logging system. Well, obviously that's not going to be in the historical data because it hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
But you lose that hierarchy because now there's no way you can say that. This is all data driven. And so one thing you could do is you can, and this would be the worst possible way to do it. You could flip on admin for everything for a week or two, let CloudTrail build up a history and then have it remake the policies. That seems a bit suboptimal.
No, but it's kind of like this. So think about it this way. If I want to grant access to something to L1, and then L2 of course has all the permissions of L1 and more. So let's say D1 is the additional permissions or policies that it has, and then L3 has all the permissions of L2 and a D2, which is the delta of new permissions. Something like this, if you started applying the fine-grained control, it would generate a policy for L3, which is a flat set of very fine-grained controls. Now, in an ideal world, I want L3 to only have the permissions of L2 and that delta, and L2 to have permissions only of L1 plus some delta. So I can't just change L1 and expect everything will cascade all the way up to L3. I will literally have to go now to every one of the L1, L2, and L3 policies and make explicit changes over there. And I can imagine how complex those documents are going to be. Generated policies are never simple, straightforward, well managed. They're going to be nightmares to.
And you're right that you have to reverse engineer it. And also, if you have some function that's doing something it shouldn't, then you use the CloudTrail history to generate that policy. That CloudTrail history is going to grant that permission because it's in the history.
Correct.
And so it's I guess it's the continuation of that garbage in, garbage out issue with machine learning. Is if this history is based on something that's not perfect, it's going to propagate that imperfection.
Correct. And I really wish it would make it easier. Like I wish the analyzer would actually look at all of the data and say, this particular policy grants way more permissions than needed. And this is the new policy that you should have, but then let someone figure out how to organize their stuff a little better. Or figure out the place where you would make the change to have the least impact, I guess.
Well, that gets into, I guess, what we're calling combinatorial optimization on this enormous search space. And just to kind of wrap up the segment, I mean, this is a hard problem, right? So as much as we can rag on IAM, this is a really hard problem. It's been
I agree.
Just looking at the history of it, just the AWS Labs had the AWS IAM generator, which took a bit of a different approach. Different companies like Salesforce has Policy Sentry, which is also all about building up IAM policies. IAM least privilege policy generator. Netflix made this thing called Aardvark and paired it with another thing called RepoKid, which is AWS least privilege. So it's a complicated problem that a lot of big organizations have taken a stab at. Here's a good blog post by Airbnb about access management at scale. I think the principle of least privilege is a really important one, but then how to...
Yeah, and I think that's a sound principle, but just implementing it is very complex.
Yeah, how to deal with that is another thing. Well, I think that wraps us up for today, and I think we've gone a little bit over, but it's a great discussion, and I'm glad that we were able to have that.
Absolutely. Looking forward to catching up with everyone next week. We'll have a bunch of other interesting and exciting things to talk about.
Definitely. All right, everyone. Well, thanks again. And hopefully you have a nice week, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Let's find the credits. I misplaced my banner. And there we go. Bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your